In 1948, the American political establishment stood in opposition to one Henry Wallace. To the burgeoning national security state, Wallace was the ultimate nightmare. He was Roosevelt's former vice president, the heir apparent to the New Deal, and a man who had been unceremoniously dumped from the 1944 ticket because he was simply too progressive for the bosses of the Democratic Party. By the time the 1948 election rolled around, Wallace was leading a crusade. He formed the Progressive Party, running a third-party campaign that openly challenged the Democratic Party's shift towards Cold War militarism. Wallace was quite Soviet-friendly. He argued for a world of peaceful coexistence, a vision diametrically opposed to the containment doctrine being cooked up in the smoke-filled rooms of the nascent CIA and the State Department. To the permanent bureaucracy of the 1940s, the architects of the new American hegemony, Wallace was a dangerous deviationist. He dared to challenge their grand strategy for the Middle East, a region they were already eyeing for its resources and its potential to anchor a global alliance against international communism. The establishment wanted stability. They wanted to maintain the status quo with the Arab monarchies that were already in the pocket of British power. But Wallace had a different plan. He wanted to break the establishment's mold. He advocated for a policy the State Department viewed as reckless, destabilizing threat to Western interests. He was a committed critic of empire, an anti-imperialist. So, like the Soviet Union at the time, he was a fanatic supporter of the formation of the State of Israel. If you find that confusing, it is because you have been sold a narrative that is, quite frankly, historically illiterate rubbish. A prevailing modern assumption, one that's become a pillar of the Western left, is the implicit notion that Israel was designed from its inception as an inherent outpost of American power in the Middle East. It is a clean story, and it serves an important purpose. It conceals the deeply embarrassing role that the ideological predecessor of today's anti-imperialists played in that state's very formation. At the moment of its birth, Israel was not an American project. In fact, it was one of the Western left's cause célèbre. To the progressives of 1948, the formation of Israel was not an expansion of Western power, but a blow against it. At the time, the imperial power in the region was Great Britain, which was firmly aligned with the local Arab states. The left saw the Zionist movement with its socialist communes, its powerful labor unions, and collective ethos as a revolutionary force standing against the British-backed status quo. While the American State Department was worrying that a Jewish state would alienate the oil-producing nations of the region, the Soviet Union was busy making it a reality. It was the Soviet bloc, specifically through Czechoslovakia, that provided crucial weapons for Israel's survival when the West provided it insufficient help. The fact that this history has been largely erased from the modern left activist memory is an expression of the utter emptiness of what we call anti-imperialist politics today. It is an ideology that has become so hollow that it really only defines itself by what it opposes. It's a pathology that could have learned its lesson before even the formation of Israel, but has still refused to do so to this day. Before World War II, a significant portion of the global anti-colonial movement looked at Imperial Japan and saw a hero, because Japan was challenging the American and British empires in the Pacific. These critics gave a pass to a regime that increasingly proved to be a brutal, expansionist, totalitarian power, supporting an empire just to stick it to the West. Today, we see much the same pattern. We see an agnosticism, or at worst a quiet sympathy, for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or China's hostile ambitions towards Taiwan. Many so-called anti-imperialists cover for these regimes simply because they often stand in opposition to Western interests. To be clear, identifying this is far from a defense of Western capitalist hegemony. One can, for example, adopt the position that in the as of this video current conflict between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other, The case for the Islamic regime as a lesser evil is not a difficult argument to make. But that doesn't make a good out of them, and especially does not make a good out of its Russian ally. The general public knows this very well. Polling in the United States and the Western world at large consistently shows the average person possesses a nuance often missing on significant chunks of the activist political left. The public is capable of seeing the conflict against Iran as not only a disaster but a crime, and the genocidal apartheid against the Palestinians as indefensible, while simultaneously opposing Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Chinese hostility towards Taiwan. The public knows that you don't have to sing the praises of every action of every autocrat that steps in the way of the Western world. The post-Cold War anti-imperialist vision fails to deliver a sober understanding of reality, acting as though it is creating space for a counter-hegemony to Western capitalism that hasn't existed since the Soviet Union fell. There's a reason that the Soviets scared Western capitalism into the welfare state and aggressive public investment efforts, while China does not. Instead, post-Cold War anti-imperialism functions as a mechanism to prevent the Western left from ever really developing a coherent, positive foreign policy. The kind of policy that you need if you want to challenge for power within the West. This is not a coincidence. There is a phrase that goes like this: the purpose of a system is what it does. If this vision consistently results in the left supporting reactionaries and alienating the general public, then that might just as well be its purpose. It keeps the left in a playground of reaction in more ways than one, safely removed from the actual levers of statecraft. It might be unpopular among many leftists to say, but there needs to be an end put to the post-Cold War anti-imperialism that's become nothing more than a reflexive filter that says because the capitalist West is bad, that whatever is opposing it, no matter how reactionary and no matter the context, must be good. At best, it's an intellectually lazy shortcut that prevents us from thinking constructively. A real foreign policy for the left should not just be about what we oppose. It should not just be about looking for a good guy in every autocrat who shouts at Washington and other Western capitals. It should be about what we actually want to build in the world. I also really do mean build. Passive disengagement as atonement for centuries of Western imperialism is not enough if it ever was. There are too many active crises in the world to be addressed simply by the West pulling back. If nothing else, too much capacity to act has been siphoned from the rest of the world to leave it alone to face the challenges of the 21st century. Just to look at climate change alone, for example. And the world powers that exist out of the West have shown little interest, even if they have the capacity, of carrying the weight of all that, even in the complete absence of Western intervention, even if we were to assume, against all evidence, their best intentions. Until the left can move past this empty reactive shell of a foreign policy, its apparent wins against Western capitalist hegemony will purely be the product of a stumbling status quo, and those that have power will still remain the ones writing the world story, with the left remaining exactly what the global capitalist political establishment wants it: loud, angry, and mostly inconsequential. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.